it was vaccines, then gas, and now the EU will make joint purchases of defense equipment. The latest emergency is due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and possible weakening of US protection in Europe. To raise the necessary funds, the EU created a new financial instrument. It's called SAFE, short for Security Action for Europe, and we'll explain it in this EU Decoded.
SAFE will have 150 billion euro, which the EU will borrow on the financial markets. It is one of the pillars of the Readiness 2030 plan, which aims to mobilize 800 billion euro for defense investment by the end of the decade. The aim is to increase the production capacity of air and anti-missile defense, artillery systems, missiles and ammunition, drones and anti-drone systems, protection of critical infrastructure including space, military mobility, cyber, artificial intelligence and electronic warfare.
Each one of the 27 member states will be able to borrow from this fund, and they can enter into partnerships with other member states. We'll talk more about those partnerships later, but for now let's hear what Europeans think about more investment in defense.
Jedes Land braucht ein Minimum an Entwicklung, auch auf Rüstungsebene. Wenn es aber darum geht, jetzt wieder so ein Wettrüsten zu initiieren, dann bin ich nicht dafür.
Ich bin sehr für eine gemeinsame europäische Verteidigungsanstrengung, aber die einzelnen Budgets kann man auch in den Nationalstaaten lassen. Und vor allen Dingen muss man dafür keine Schulden aufnehmen.
Perché comunque credo che ci sono priorità più urgenti da affrontare sia in Italia, in Europa.
Io sì, sono d'accordo. Perché praticamente noi dobbiamo pure difenderci e il pericolo l'abbiamo alle porte.
Euronews defense reporter Alice Tidy has covered this regulation. What is the situation with regard to military equipment production in the EU, and how can the fund play a role?
So Russia's war in Ukraine and the EU's bid to support Kyiv has really highlighted the dependencies and the deficiencies of the EU defence industrial base and how ill-prepared we were should we be forced into a conventional war. SAFE is about firing up European weapons manufacturing lines by getting member states to buy strategically and together so that the industry becomes less fragmented and quicker to produce, and our armies, more crucially, become more interoperable. And of course, also it's about putting prices down.
Which countries are showing interest in this fund, and how does it relate to the fiscal deficit limits imposed by the Stability and Growth Pact?
So many of the member states who have lower credit ratings than the Commission may very well be interested in using SAFE. This is the case of Latvia, for instance, which has said it wants to use the funds. So the EU rules planned for deficits to not exceed 3% of GDP for each member state, but this plan is saying we're going to allow you to exceed that amount by 1.5% annually, provided that 1.5% extra spending is only on defence. About more than half of member states have requested the activation with the Commission.
Usually, these regulations are approved by the Council, which represents the member states, and by the European Parliament. Why this time MEPs were excluded from the process, and how did they react?
So the Commission decided to invoke Article 122 of the treaty. This can only be invoked in case of severe difficulties in obtaining certain items, or if a member state is seriously threatened with severe difficulties caused by natural disaster or by exceptional occurrences beyond its control. The Legal Affairs Committee of the Parliament decided, however, that this was not the right strategy or the right legal basis for this legislation, and on their recommendation, Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament, wrote to her counterpart in the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, saying that they would sue if they didn't change tack.
To receive loans, governments have to meet certain conditions. 65% of the value of each piece of military equipment must be produced in one of the EU 27 member states, Ukraine and the members of the European Free Trade Association, Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway. The remaining 35% can also come from any third country around the world. In the common public procurement part, EU candidate countries such as the Western Balkans and third countries that have bilateral security and defense partnerships like Japan, South Korea and the United Kingdom can participate.
Our guest is German MEP Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann from Renew Group, who chairs the European Parliament Security and Defence Committee. This financial instrument, SAFE, is based on more debt to be paid off by governments over 45 years. Is this justified and, above all, enough to boost European arms production?
So it's a possibility for countries to find money to buy military equipment. It's not only tanks or rockets. It's also the question to buy very important things, hybrid war, cyber war. So it's a beginning, and I think it's a very good sign. And what happens afterwards, we will see.
We will still be dependent of imports or partnerships with other countries, be it Norway, Japan or Korea. Do you think this is the way to do the transition?
I wouldn't say first Europe, but it's important if you talk to my colleagues all over the countries, military equipment. It's not only a question of security. Military equipment, it's a kind of dual use. It's a kind to develop technological, really huge things, and this is also important for civil things. So yes, we have to support and we have to boost Europe.
United States President Trump is demanding higher contributions to NATO, which will be difficult for some member states. The European Union has now this program, Rearm Europe 2030. Will it be enough to convince the United States to keep its support for Europeans' defense?
There is one big player, and this is China. China is an observer. China will see, are they just talking about freedom and peace, or are they really ready to defend their freedom and peace? If Ukraine lost this war, if we are not able to pay more, to do more, then it's easy to say for China, come on, they are just talking. And so I think that we have to work together all over the world, not only here and there. And I'm optimistic that the President of the United States will realize what we are now starting to do.
In addition to this financial instrument, the EU has plans to raise more money. The European Commission proposed to use the cohesion funds intended for regional development. The European Investment Bank will also try to mobilize private money for the first time for this area. It remains to be seen whether the European Union will have the financial capacity to face the new security challenges.